So I used to be very anti-gun, but now I am pro-gun due to the reason of this. I've lived in Canada and I've lived in Texas. When I lived in Canada, if one person had a gun illegally, they're in control and they can body pretty much everybody else in that area. There was even police officers that only carried tasers. But in Texas, if one person pulls out a gun illegally, 100 people around them are also going to pull out a gun and kill that guy before he does anything. So I believe that guns keep guns in check. And while I do believe it, I can humor the idea, well, if nobody had guns, it'd be fine. Sure, but somebody's gonna get a gun. If you have a differing viewpoint, that's completely fine, but I'm only giving you my rationale for how I think. Feel free to tell me how I'm wrong in the comments. I'd love to broaden my perspective on what you guys think. Only law-abiding citizens follow the law? Exactly. So I think having guns is good to keep the bad guys in check. Here's a great one. The best gun debate I've had in years. Let's hear what other people think.
So I just had a question on your thoughts on if we need more gun control in the country or not. I'm very pro protecting America and the citizens that live in it. And so I think that we should have more gun control because there's a lot of school shootings that happen, as we mentioned. And, I just think it would do a lot to protect the people. And I think the Second Amendment also qualifies that we should have regulations for guns.
Okay.
I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Sure. Do you think gun ownership is a right or a privilege?
I think it's a right, but it comes with responsibilities.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, I think that there should be things in place, things like red flag laws and things like that. The AG just approved Mel Gibson to get his gun rights back, even though he had a domestic violence charge. So, I don't think the people that commit these violent crimes should be able to buy guns and things like that. And I think we should have red flag laws in place to make sure that those violent criminals aren't getting guns.
Okay, so
I know a lot of people like to say that everyone deserves to have a gun, but I do think that if there are certain crimes that you have committed, I do think that it's completely fine to revoke those rights from criminals. I think if you've killed someone, I think if you've raped someone, I think if you've done armed robbery, I think that if you've committed a certain amount of crimes, you absolutely should lose your right to have a gun. I absolutely agree with that.
let's go. So tell me.
Brave take? I don't think that's brave at all. I think that's just common sense. I was having a conversation with somebody else who says, even if you're a fucking criminal, you should be allowed to have guns. I just don't think so.
Your perfect world, what would constitute a red flag?
Just things like, we can look into any kind of medication and things like that that can affect someone's...
That could be dangerous, right? That could be there's a lot of vets that come home from war and that are on a lot of medication. A lot of vets could have their weapons taken away.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying... Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you. It's the pollen or something. Thank you.
I'm not necessarily saying, it's mainly to prevent, future shootings and things like that, and also... putting in place things like a federal registry so that we know, the types of guns that people have. And, it would just essentially be a federal registry that shows these are the guns that this person has, in case a cop has to go on something like a domestic call. That's the most dangerous call they can go on. So,
yeah, I can see you're coming after this from a good perspective. Let me ask one other question. What would you say is the ultimate and final purpose of the Second Amendment?
I think it's self-defense against a tyrannical government, which...
We agree. Sure. Great. Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, but I think within the Second Amendment, it also implies that we have high regulations in the first four words.
Sort of.
Of it.
Well-regulated militia
right.
actually meant well-armed, but that's a separate issue. But
well, how do you know? You're interpreting what the Founding Fathers
Well,
put
they
in.
said it in the Federalist Papers, right? So it's not just me, but also in the Heller decision, in the 5-4 decision, that said that gun ownership was a right. This was a hotly debated thing.
But do you disagree? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you disagree with the idea of a federal registry like that?
Oh, without a doubt. The only reason you'd want to register the guns is if you want to confiscate them.
Well, or to make sure that people like officers of the law are protected and know what they're going into. A domestic...
I also believe that you should have to register your guns. I think it's important information to have. Yeah, and I think it can also prevent a lot of criminals from getting away with, wrongdoing. No reason not to. Yeah, I think you should have to register your guns.
That's a good argument.
Right.
To your credit. I will try to make a better argument where the problem of the government knowing where every gun is would then lead itself towards mass confiscation. And I would agree with you, a well-armed citizenry is the greatest protectorate of liberty and freedom in this country.
Sure.
Even the Army has things like drones and tanks and things like that out-arm, citizens that have...
Yes and no. We've seen it in several instances where at least a citizen...
Dude, if this guy thinks that citizens can't compete with the military's, defense force and the arms that they have, they should see Brandon's arm room. Because I'm pretty sure Brandon Herrera has more guns than 1,000 Army soldiers. it's fucking insane.
And that's a good argument, but I would say a little flawed. Where the citizens are able to protect themselves in some ways, it's a much harder population to control.
I understand, but so
That was a joke, by the way. I understand the military would absolutely blow the civilians out of the water.
do you think a federal registry would infringe on the rights?
Potentially. I mean, I think that there's no good argument, I think, other than potential. I ascribe to the government bad motives and bad intentions when it wants to infringe more on these types of freedoms and liberties.
Well, I understand. I just personally don't see it as an infringement because, like we just said, and I think we agree.
I can see both sides. I can see how if the government knows everything you have and the government knows everything you're going to do, then it's going to be easier for them to become corrupt and take advantage of those laws and regulations put in place to keep the citizens weaker than them. However, I also see that if everyone can own guns without any extra regulations to keep them moderated and checked, I can see that causing a lot more crime in a lot of areas due to too ease of access of getting armed.
That owning a gun is a right. However,
Yes.
I think it was responsibilities. But also, I wanted to ask: is voting
By the way, I think this is a great debate.
a right, or is that a privilege?
Well, it is a right, and that's so felons can get their rights back, right? And so,
Right.
but rights can be suspended or delayed.
Sure.
And we
Right,
both agree
but-
with that. So,
right,
for
but-
example, like somebody in prison doesn't get guns.
Right, no, of course.
Somebody in prison doesn't have the same free speech rights that you might
Right,
have.
but what's the first thing that you have to do if you want to vote in this country? You have to register, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a federal registration to be able to vote.
Also, I also think that everybody should have to have an ID card to vote. There's a lot of people saying that they believe people don't need an ID card to vote. Brother, you need an ID to drink, you need an ID to drive, you need an ID to own a gun, you need an ID to go into a movie theater. Yeah, I think you should present your ID before voting for the president of our fucking country. So obvious.
In this country, so why not? And we can agree that keeping safe and keeping our elections to where people who shouldn't vote aren't voting is that's keeping America safe because we don't want people who
That's a fair. That's a
can't
fair
vote.
point. I would say there's
Yeah.
something that there's a technical difference between a voter registration roll and a gun registration
Right, guns
roll.
are much more dangerous.
Well, also, but guns in many different ways, they would go after the guns a lot more than the voter registration roll.
Well, how do we know, though?
My worldview comes out of one in the 20th century, where almost every totalitarian government went after the guns first, and the confiscation of guns then leads into the erosion of freedom and liberty.
Right, but wouldn't you say in the 20th century, as you just said, that the disparity between the technology that citizens had to protect themselves compared to what the military had, wouldn't you say that there was a much smaller disparity as opposed to what we see nowadays?
Somewhat. I think that's a fair point.
So,
I'm acknowledging that's a fair point.
okay.
But do you see my perspective as well?
No, I do
that,
understand.
That in
It's-
armed
it's-
citizenry, also it says shall not be infringed, so we have to kind of wrestle with those two things
Right, but
simultaneously.
so if it's just a semantics argument, then to that point,
Well, it's
because,
not. I mean, semantics is meaning. That's literally what the word means. But
right, but
so,
you're saying because it says shall not be infringed, we can't do anything. But
No,
does
no,
that
I'm
mean,
saying,
does that
though,
mean
that
voting rights can be
I'm
infringed?
saying
Because it doesn't say it cannot be infringed.
I'm saying I err on the side that more government regulation around guns means that they'll try to take good people's guns away, which then results in less global or let's just say national freedom and liberty.
What if getting the medicine you need didn't have to be so
God damn it, brother. I was enjoying watching that. Shut the fuck up. Sorry.
Potentially lead to more danger and less guns.
Yes
lead
and
to less
no.
danger?
I mean, there's plenty of evidence to show that states that have more. So like, if you take Houston and Chicago, about comparable populations, Houston actually has warmer weather, which means potentially more gang violence. They have about half, if not even less, the amount of homicides per year than in Chicago. Chicago has much stricter gun laws than Houston, like incredibly strict gun laws.
I understand, but I'm also, well, I think part of what plays into that is the gun laws that are around those cities. They're a lot more lenient than those cities themselves. So I think, I'm not saying that's entirely the cause of it, but I'm saying
I've heard
that's
that my whole life, so yeah.
right. But I'm basically just talking about preventing people that have committed crimes such as domestic violence. I know I mentioned Pam Bondi gave Mel Gibson his rights to purchase a gun again, even though he pled guilty to battery domestic violence charge in 2011, and yet
There is not a single black person in this crowd. I just noticed that. There is not a single black person in this whole crowd. I was looking for a second because some guy said, is that Duke Nukem in the crowd? And I've been looking for him, and then I realized there is no blacks in this whole crowd. I mean, maybe that's one right there, but I think that's an Indian. There's no blacks. That's crazy.
now he is able to purchase a gun again, which I disagree with because he committed a violent crime. I mean, do you disagree with that personally?
No, I mean, I don't know the details of the case, but I think I've met Mel Gibson. I think he should be able to own a gun. I mean, like
Just off of speaking to him, though, even though with his
yeah, I
criminal
mean,
history. And
I don't.
everything?
Again, I don't know all the details. Do I think
You're
that
broke. Thank you, bro.
the idea of taking his rights away because of something that happened that I don't know all the details about 14
Well, he
years
pled
ago?
guilty to it, though.
Again,
I mean,
I find that to be a little bit of an infringement on basic rights.
even though he literally
Again, I don't
committed
know the
violence against
details
his life.
around that, but
Let me Google what Mel Gibson did before weighing in on this. Gibson pleaded no contest in Los Angeles Superior Court to a misdemeanor charge of battering his former girlfriend as part of a deal with prosecutors that allowed him to avoid jail time. I think if you beat your girlfriend, you shouldn't be able to own a gun. I think if you've committed the violent crime, you should be disarmed. If you are not punished for the wrongdoings that you have adequately, it's going to lead to other people thinking they can get away with it when they know that the punishment is so lenient. If I knew that I could get away with beating my girlfriend and the only fine that I would have to do is pay like $500, right? I would just be burning money. You know what I mean? Not that I would want to beat my girlfriend, but I'm just saying, like, if the punishment doesn't match the crime, then more crimes are going to be committed. And if you can get away with beating your girlfriend and the one thing that you want is just going to come back after 2 years, I feel like it's going to lead other citizens to just wanting to do it if the punishments aren't severe enough. I'm a firm believer to lead nations by examples. And if one person knows, oh shit, if this happened to this guy, then it's going to happen to me too, you're going to want that to be pretty severe so it keeps people in line. Because anarchy, chaos, you want to avoid that shit at all costs. So I think having very severe punishments is quite good, but it also depends how the government regulates them. It's like on one hand I can see, and I try to be very fair, on one hand I can see how who is the government to say that I'm no longer fit to own this because I did this shit 12 years ago. I totally understand that perspective. But on the other hand, I'm more so in favor of, well, if you fucked up once, you're probably going to fuck up again. Because as a guy who thinks, well, they did this 5 years ago, there's no way they're going to do it again. Oh, they did it again. It just happens quite a lot. I can see both sides, but I believe that if you're a person who's committed a violent crime, you should lose your access to gun rights.
But I guess we're getting to a place where, do you think anyone that's convicted of a violent crime should be able to own guns again?
No.
Not at
Oh,
all.
wow,
If they're
okay.
committing a violent crime, absolutely not. I think
Yeah,
people
Sam.
should protect people in America, which I think you agree with, and I think
Yeah, but
that's how we protect America.
that's a balance. Are we going to really say the federal government is going to protect us from ourselves when it comes to guns?
No, I mean it's less about the federal government taking away guns and more just allowing them to protect their citizens. And it's not about getting rid of guns. I'm a gun owner myself. I go hunting.
No,
I
I'm
was
not
on a
doubting any of that.
competitive
What
team.
state
but
would you say has the gun laws that are the most appealing to your?
And let me just show you guys a statistic on why I think this is totally okay. So 3.9% of individuals have at least one violent conviction. I'm also a firm believer that if you just remove the bottom five, this is a take that me and Ashley will both agree on. If you were to just remove the bottom 5%, the bottom 5% of the population, the other 95% would have much better lives. So yeah, I'm okay with, Asmund says 2%. Well, okay. That's, it's being a little bit generous here. Remove the bottom 5%, the rest of the 90% is good to go. Or the rest of the 95% is good to go.
Your worldview.
I don't know specific state laws, if I'm being completely honest with you. But
Yeah.
Something to think about.
But I'm speaking, even just the federal registry itself, I think that would protect, a lot of officers of the law. Like I said, when they go on domestic calls, that's the most dangerous call that an officer
So
Sure.
there
can go on.
there's an informal registry, not a formal one. Just gun dealers are supposed to report.
Right,
gun,
but do you
gun
really think
sales.
that they do all the time, though?
No, of course not. Obviously, I mean,
Right,
I
so
live in
wouldn't the
reality.
federal
But
registry eliminate that problem, then?
again, I would go back to a formal registry. You register in order to confiscate. It is a prerequisite towards confiscation.
Isn't that just a slippery slope argument, though? If you give
Well,
one
it's
thing,
not.
then
It's
another
a,
thing's
it's a
going to go?
historical argument, right? We see
Sure.
that throughout totalitarian dictatorships throughout the 20th century, where if you want to take the weapons away, you first ask for a collection of all the items that you then want to collect. But I could see you're coming after this in good faith. I tend to be on a much more libertarian side, even though I'm not libertarian. We actually need looser gun laws because I think that
Looser gun laws?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
what
especially in
way?
states
Like-
like Chicago and Illinois, where it's very basic Second Amendment rights. So I'll give you a great example.
Okay.
In a state like
The other thing is, and I think Charlie's going to touch on this, giving blanket statement laws for the entirety of the United States will never work due to the fact that every state is so drastically different. It even comes down to like every city. Like the difference between Austin and San Antonio is so drastic. It is so drastic. So you really need to have more nuanced laws when you know what territory you're dealing with, because different territories are going to deal very differently, and you have to deal with this on a case-by-case basis, because overarching blanket statements almost never work, especially for such a diverse population.
Rhode Island or New York,
Right.
it could take a woman upwards of 30 days to get a gun. So let's say a man wants to actually do harm to her, and she gets threats and the police won't intervene. I think she should be able to get a gun that afternoon to protect herself.
I understand that.
So
but
in that case, I think that gun laws should be looser.
I understand.
I think,
in that regard, I do agree with you.
Cool. So like
Absolutely.
that would be
But-
an instance of that. And I also will go back to this idea of red flag laws. We have seen case after case of it being abused, of veterans having their weapons taken away because of fake accusations and, let's just say, faulty accusations saying that they're mentally unbalanced, so on and so forth.
But do you think that they could investigate cases like that and see if there aren't any medications? I mean, a lot of these
They can.
antidepressants can change your brain
For
chemistry.
sure.
And
And
completely
some of
alter
it, though,
you.
is they take the guns away first and they ask questions after. It's a difficult, very, I don't want to say gray area, but
That's a very hard thing to deal with.
edge part of the law.
Because on one hand, I understand that soldiers coming back from war are going to be incredibly fucked up, having to live in a state of panic and never feeling safe, and then them having to readjust and try to feel safe again could lead them to, perhaps getting in altercations that could have otherwise been avoided if their mental state was a bit more calm. However, to rob a veteran of their arms, one thing they think that they need to have in order to feel safe, is also fucking terrible. I think that's a horrible situation and a very difficult issue to deal with everyone being in total agreement. I think that's going to be very hard to deal with.
Where I tend to, and a respectable position, respect to you, I tend to err on the side of it is a right. The government screws up more than it does correct in this specific portion. And the downside to having more guns is far better than the downside of having only the government have guns.
Do you think past a certain age you shouldn't be able to drive a car? To be completely honest, yes. I don't think if you're 90 years old you should be driving a car.
Even if that can cost American lives.
I believe that probably after 70 years old, taking cognitive tests to see that if you're still able to function properly is important to maintain a driver's license. And every 2 years you get checked on your cognitive incline or cognitive decline to see whether you're road safe or not. Could probably lead to a lot of accidents being avoided and traffic jams.
Though, I mean, me personally, I would give
Well-
up all of my guns in a heartbeat if I knew for a fact that
Okay,
it was going to
let's-
save one life.
Can I do a thought experiment to you?
Sure.
So do you think we should ban driving?
No, I don't think so.
Of course
And I know
not.
where you're going with this. 'Cause car crashes are more.
55,000 people a year die from car
Yeah.
accidents, right?
Right,
So
absolutely. But those are accidents, though. That's not someone intentionally
well,
going
that's
and
not
killing
true.
somebody.
Some people intentionally do, or some people have DUIs, right? Some of it is
Right.
an act of agency, not just accidents, right? Meaning that they are reckless with the technology.
I understand.
You would agree a DUI is a reckless act.
Or what could be cool is person gets to a certain age and they're not cognitively in the best shape. They're forced to drive a self-driving car, right? Like they have to own a Tesla or some shit. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure.
And that-
Absolutely.
I think self-driving technology for cars is oh my God, I think it's really going to revolutionize the planet. I think commutes are going to become a lot less. I think traffic jams are going to become a thing of the past in 50, 60 years, which is really exciting to think about. I'll be dead, but it's still kind of cool.
The vast majority of auto deaths,
Right.
both in the interior of the vehicle and the exterior.
Right, but then what do you have to do to be able to drive, though? You have to get a driver's license. You have to take a test with an
No,
instructor.
of course, but I'm saying if the pursuit of to save, if it's all about saving lives, then
Yeah.
then there are certain things that we'd get rid of. I would say though that government is not merely there for our safety; it's one of the primary focuses.
I also think about I think talking about owning a gun and having a car is very different. I think that's a really big reach.
You have to balance liberty and safety, and that's a tough balance at times. I fall on this issue on the side of liberty. Final thought.
So what? Yeah, just one last quick question, I promise. What about something, as I mentioned, with taking a driving test to be able to get a driver's license, you have to prove that you know how to operate the vehicle safely. What about something similar to that with owning a gun? Some kind of thing where you go to a range with a trained professional,
No.
you show that you know how to operate the gun, safely, know how to store it safely, things like that. Yet,
Yeah, I mean,
and then
so-
once you pass that, you get some kind of card that allows you to buy a gun.
I
I mean, it's all
think
about
that-
protections. It's not about
Yes,
restricting
on
rights.
that you might have some agreement with me, because actually the number one cause of errant gun deaths is accidental discharges. People that don't know what they're doing with their gun.
I would like to also say I do believe, and this is one that's probably a bit more controversial for my chat. I do believe that you should have to take a test to prove that you know how to operate a gun safely and effectively to own a gun. And I think that's the bare minimum. You have to take a test to drive a car. I think it's not too hard to ask for gun regulation and making sure people know how to operate a gun before buying one. I think it saves a lot of lives from people accidentally killing themselves because they don't know what the fuck they're doing with it.
I understand.
And so I think that could be prevented through better training. So for that,
Totally understand if you disagree with that. Totally fine. I just think it would prevent a lot of accidental deaths and also ensure that the people who are ready to arm themselves can do so properly and effectively with a little bit of like a 2-hour course. You know, that's how long my course was. I watched a 4-hour video and then I did a shooting test. That's what I did. So this is what I did to get my license to carry. It was a 4-hour test. And then I went in and I shot 100 shots. I had to hit this target with, I believe, I had to hit it for like 250 points, and I got 500 points because I just banged it. I got a perfect score. Every shot was dead center, so I got a perfect fucking score. But yeah, I mean, it was easy, in and out in less than a day, and I think that's fine for having to carry something that important for your safety, as well as to ensure to yourself, your family, that you know what to do with proper safety, gun safety, and gun operation. But that's just my opinion.